doing? I want to know how many of you all actually made it to midnight, Central Standard Time. How many of you all made it to 11? You said, hey, that's New York time. We're good with that. How many of y'all? Okay. Just seeing everyone's hands in the room for that. I am very impressed, everyone who is here this morning and the ones who are kind of weirdly awake. And so I love that. My name is Truett Ross, and I serve as a ministry resident here. And so Aaron is out this week, and so I just want to thank him for the opportunity to be able to preach with you all. If we haven't met, let's talk afterwards. I'd love to get to know you better. I want to tell you about a moment in my life that I am feeling the ramifications and the effects to this day. On June 14th, 2012, iTunes was doing their weekly free downloads. And I said, hey, I'll try it. There was an artist named Ed Sheeran, a new guy I'd never heard of. And I said, there's a song called The A-Team. I'll download that. I pushed download. I think some of y'all know where I'm going with this. Every time since then I've gotten in my car, A-Team plays off the bat. Anyone have a song when you just walk into your car, automatically it comes on? And at one point, it was a song maybe you really loved. Maybe at worst, you were neutral towards. Now, literally every time you go into it, you can't listen to it anymore. You got to go skip off the bat, and you can't get rid of it somehow. Anyone have that at all where literally you feel something that you didn't even expect? That little moment in 2012, just pushing purchased. I feel the ramifications in 2023. Now, that's a silly example, but my guess is many of us have moments where in the moment, these small little decisions, we feel the effects weeks and years and even a lifetime later. Now, it could be bigger than just a song download. Maybe it was that time where you send in your application to a job just saying, hey, I don't know what will come of this. And what happens? You've been at that company or you've been working in that field for years. That application, or maybe it was a conversation with a friend that said, hey, maybe you should try this out. And that one conversation led to a job. Maybe it's a little bit more personal than that. Maybe it's that first date you went on and you're not sure, is there something there? And after that one date, it turns into a relationship, which turns into a family and kids. And you're looking back, who would have known in that one date what would come all of these years later? Our life is full of many minor decisions that in the moment, we don't know the full weight of them. I'm sure we can sit around and talk about that all morning. But what I want to do is direct us into Scripture. We're going to be in Mark 1, 16 through 20. And my guess is this is a passage that many of us are familiar with. We recognize it, but what we're going to look at is we're going to look at four men in particular who, with a chance encounter in a moment, make a decision. And not only do they feel that decision for weeks and years, but they feel that decision for the rest of their lives. What I'm going to hopefully for us today, whether we know Jesus and we've been following him for days, weeks, months, years, or whether we're not sure what this means to be a disciple of Jesus, what I hope today is we're going to look at not just hopefully something that will affect us for 2023, but hopefully for the rest of our lives. So, if it's not too much to ask on our early New Year's morning, if you all would mind standing as we read Mark chapter 1, verses 16 through 20. Now, as he passed alongside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew and Simon's brother casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. "Follow me," Jesus told them, "and I will make you fish for people." Immediately, they left their nets and they followed him. Now, going on a little farther, he saw James, the son of Zebedee, and his brother John in a boat putting their nets in order. Immediately, he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired men and followed him. We all bow. Dearly Father, we just want to come to you, and we want to thank you that you came to us first, whether we recognize it or not, that you were in search of us when we had no idea who you were, or maybe when we just didn't want to know who you were, God. I want to thank you for loving us. I want to thank you for calling out to us, for seeing something in us and calling us to something so much greater than we deserve. I pray for everyone in this room, whether they are trying to navigate 2023 in a new way. I pray that on the foremost part of our mind, we see that we want to grow and be more like you, that this calling is greater than any calling that we have. In your name, Jesus, amen. What we're going to look at today is that Jesus calls normal people in a unique way into a unique calling. Jesus calls just ordinary, just normal people, no one special, but he calls them in a very unique way for his day, and he calls them to a very unique calling as well. Let's start off by just looking at this. Jesus calls normal, ordinary people. There's not a lot of information that's given about these guys. We get their name, that's important. We get that they are fishermen, their trade, and we get that they have a family, right? We get that there's 2 brothers, and we get that there's a father to the last 2 brothers. It's almost like small talk, which I know is our favorite thing to do. But it's like small talk where, what do you do for work? Tell me a little bit about your family. That's all that we get about these men. We don't get a lot of information, but one thing that's really, really important is that they're fishermen. I think sometimes we can downplay the importance of like fishermen in this day and age. This wasn't just like, hey, they just do a labor job. There's a lot of things happening. The main food source for the whole world back then was not meat, it's fish. That may hurt our Tennessee hearts. We may think pork barbecue should be the main food source. But for them, fish was the main food source. And the Sea of Galilee had 16 different ports all along the way. This was a competitive trade. Everywhere from Alexandria into Egypt, all the way to Rome, were taking fish from these areas. These men had to know their trade. So what do we know about them? It means they were skilled in their trade. They knew the technicalities of it all. Not only that, they had to have an idea of knowing Greek because you're having to trade with different people. So there was a little bit of education, maybe not formal education, but maybe it was just street smarts that they had. They were able to pick up some of the language. But not only that, you got to be a good businessman. Here's the thing. There's 16 ports in the area. What are you doing? These guys are, hey, I'll make you a trade here. We'll cut a deal here. They are businessmen through and through. Well, why do I bring this up? This is an important part about these people's lives. Their work is important. And my guess for you all, your work is a core and important part of your life. Whether you spent years in education to get there, whether you spent years in that area, or whether it's just a passion that you have, your work matters. And what I love so much about this passage in particular is, where does Jesus meet these men? In the workplace. Jesus doesn't come, he doesn't say, hey, come to me where? In the temple. They aren't seeking after him there. Jesus doesn't meet them in a vision or some type of other mystical way. Not even like in another kind of holy place. Where does the ministry and discipleship start for these men? It starts at their work. You could say this: discipleship starts in the real world. I think oftentimes we can kind of disconnect maybe our work life from maybe our spiritual life, or maybe we struggle to figure out how do I fit my work life into my spiritual life? How does that connect? But what we see right here is Jesus cares about work. He cares about what these men do. He even uses the language and terminology of their work world, right? Fisher people, we'll get into that in a second. It's a little strange, but he's using their lingo and meeting them where they are at. He cares about work. Jesus here, he meets them in the real world, and that's where discipleship happens. Where is Christ trying to enter into your work? As we go into 2023, and we could talk about resolutions, we're not doing a resolution sermon, but as we talk about 2023, in our day-to-day life, where we actually spend a lot and a bulk of our time, where's Christ trying to make himself known? Maybe that's in gospel conversations with workers. Maybe you work in an area where that's a little bit more difficult to do. Where can you show Christ there? Or maybe in the hard parts of life, where is Christ trying to disciple you in your work? Because what we're seeing right here, it's not a separate field. He very much is involved in that. Do we separate our spiritual life from our work life? So we see that he reaches these very much normal people who are full of their work life and their family. He meets them there. That's the people who Jesus comes after. That's the people he calls. Again, these are not the most educated men in the world. These are not the professionals when it comes to the religious background. He doesn't come for them. I think it's really interesting. More than that, so he calls normal people, but he calls them in a very unique way. On the surface, we may read this text and go, oh, okay, yeah, Jesus calls them, like, that makes sense. That's what Jesus does. But let's take a look kind of in the first century mindset of like how rabbis walked back then. Rabbis didn't come to you and said, hey, you look really good. I want you to be part of my team. They didn't come to you. What would happen is men would study for years and they would train up and they would come to the rabbi first and say, hey, teach me. I want to know about the law. How can I do this? They had to do their own initiative in order to come. Does that happen in this text? No. Jesus comes to them. How cool is it that we have a God who has come to us? Whether we're ignorant or we're just busy in the weeds of life. And he's saying, hey, I want you, come follow me. But not only is it that unique that Jesus is the one making calling, and we don't have any other, and we have a lot of information of rabbis, but we have no other information of rabbis coming, hey, come follow me. Even more specifically, he says, come follow who? Me. There's an authority that Jesus speaks with. Students would come to their rabbis for what? I want to know about the law. Teach me the law. I want to know the specifics. I want to know how to honor God. They're not following a rabbi. They're following what? The Torah. They're following the law. Does Jesus say, hey, come follow me for the law? No. What's Jesus saying? Come follow me. There's an authority that Jesus speaks with here that is unique to him, that the other rabbis couldn't say. Jesus calls the four men to himself. It's not rooted in the Torah. It's rooted in the person of Christ. One thing I also love about this calling that's kind of unique, it's a pretty simple calling, right? I mean, Jesus doesn't in any way milk it or make it more fancy than it is. What does he say? Follow me. I'll make you fish for people. There's no persuasion that's happening here. There's no, hey, I'm going to buy you dinner so you can follow me. There's none of that going on. There's not even a good argument. Jesus is doing miracles in the book of Mark. He doesn't do a miracle like, hey, this is what I got. He leaves it simple. Come follow me. What I also love is the reverse side of this. Is remember we said that the students, when they came to their rabbis, that they would have to maybe have a requirement. This is how much Torah I know. This is why I would be a good student. This is the kind of work that I've done. Do they have to do an exam? Do they do like a little Bible test or anything? No. Jesus says, follow me. What they can learn and what they need to learn is not something that a test will teach them. It only comes by following and being with the person of Jesus. I think there's something true for us about this as well. That it's true in this text, but it's also true in our own lives. When Christ comes to us, he doesn't say, man, they had really good Sunday school attendance as a kid. Or they can do the books of Bible in order. They got some good knowledge. Or, man, they're a lot holier than the person down the street. I think they'd be good for our team. No. He takes us in our brokenness and our messiness, and maybe that's living out our lives in a way that's ungodly, or maybe it's in a self-righteous way where we grew up in the church and we think we know it all already. And he comes to us and says, you think you know a lot? I got a lot to teach you. Come follow me. What we can do, what we learn in the Christian life can only be learned in following after Jesus and being with him and spending time with him. I think this text shows us that right there. It's not something that they had beforehand. It is very much something that they had to learn. Only as Jesus is followed can he be fully known. Mark is showing us that oftentimes our faith is an action before it's fully cemented as a belief. Before we can actually have that faith, it takes a step of faith, where it's the action beforehand. My guess is if we're looking at our own Christian life and I ask you, hey, tell me a little about your testimony, that's what your testimony looks like. I didn't know all this stuff in the beginning. But man, when I started walking with Jesus, that's when it fully became cemented in my life. And my guess is, again, this has nothing to do against book knowledge by any means, but there's the experiential knowledge of I've walked with Jesus. Well, how do you know? Because Jesus has shown me in my life. That's what these men don't know yet, but they're about to experience. So we see that Jesus calls normal, just ordinary people. There's nothing too special about them. They're just willing to follow. He calls them in a unique way, in a way that he sees them and calls them out. But what I want to spend the rest of our time and the bulk of our time talking about is the unique calling that these men have. Jesus calls them, and the call that Christ gives for us is one of self-denial, and it's one of inconvenience. If you're going to put the Christian walk on a resume, if you're going to post it on Indeed or, maybe put it on a little bulletin board, and you look at what these men will have to endure in their life, and you look at the resume, hey, you're going to have to abandon your family. You're going to be hated by many. You're going to suffer for our sake. My guess is that resume doesn't look good. Like the benefit package is not there, y'all. If you're looking through it, the Christian walk, oftentimes we think, well, it's a convenient one. It's by no means an Instagram bio where you have a Bible verse and you come on Sundays, that it's so much more than that. And these men don't fully know. And my guess, if you walked with Christ for any period of time, you realize it can be difficult. Whether it's in the part of self-denial where we have to deny our own desires and our wants and what we want, whether that's sinful inherently, right? We can talk about that. Or whether it's aspirational, where there's nothing inherently sinful about it. But for some reason, those doors aren't open and we just want to force them down. What we're going to do is we're going to unpack then kind of what does this call look like, this unique call. So we see here that Jesus wants you to forsake yourself. Again, off the bat, that doesn't sound too great. Why would we even do this? We see this in the text real fast. The passage gives us a call and a response pattern. Look with me real quickly at verse 17. Jesus says, "Follow me." He says that to Simon and Andrew. And then look real quickly at verse 18. The response is, "They left their nets and followed him." We see this again in verse 20. We see he called to them. And at the ends with, "They left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired men and followed him." For every call that Christ gives, a response is also given. Now, that response may be no response at all, which is kind of a response of denial. That response may be a delayed response. We see here that the immediacy is kind of the importance that we see here. But there's a response that is needed when there's a call that happens. My question is, have you responded to Christ's call? Now, on a large sense, this could be, I don't know Jesus, or I've heard of him, but I'm not really following him in my life. But I think we can also get more specific too, maybe tailor it down. In your own personal life, are you following what Christ is calling you to? Are you engaging with the people that Christ has placed in your life? In your work and what you're doing, are you walking in a way that honors Christ? In a way that Christ would do it as well. In your marriages and in your families. Heck, in your friendships even. Are you living in a way that you are modeling Christ? What is Christ calling you to? He's calling you to a life where you forsake yourself and you follow after him. Are we living into that? The disciples respond with immediacy. Look again at verse 18, my bad. He says, "Immediately they left their nets and followed him." When I hear immediately, Mark does that many times throughout, but when I hear the word immediately, my mind will forever be stuck with last week. Anyone try and fly out at all for Christmas? Anyone here? I already hear laughs and groans. I'm assuming there's a lot in here. This past week, I was supposed to go back to Oklahoma, which is where I'm from. So if you hear an accent, that's what it is. And literally, I was supposed to fly out Thursday. On that Wednesday, 10 minutes before check-in, I go get ready to check in, and I get a text, "Flight canceled." As you can imagine, this is great. I was like, okay, well, how's this going to work? I call my girlfriend, Nicole, and I said, hey, look, how are we going to do this? Here's a flight. The best case scenario was we get on 2 separate flights. That was not a good scenario, right? And so we're thinking through, how does this work? How do you get here? And we just decided, okay, literally the only flight we can get is to Denver. If it's going to be snowing in Tennessee, it's going to be snowing in Denver for sure. And so we decided, you know what? We're just going to drive the 11 hours and just do it that night. And literally just drive through that day all the way to night. Within 2 hours, I thought I was going to be on a plane the next day, and then I'm just driving through the whole night. My guess is many of you all either felt that this past week or you've been here before, where it's like we have to act immediately. How did the disciples respond? Immediately they left their nets. It's not a delay where it's like, well, I'll get to it, or when I work around to it. They said, you know what? I want to follow after him. My question for you then is, in 2023, it's a new year. In what ways is Jesus asking you to follow after him? Would your faith be characterized by one of immediacy? Is it kind of lethargic? Is it kind of easygoing? It is. Or is it one where, you know what? I'm going to attack it. This needs to be done. This is a gospel conversation I need to have. This is a relationship that I need to mend. Is your discipleship walk one of immediacy? We see that here that they are called to deny. They're denying a lot. Think about this. Where do they leave? They're leaving their vocation. Hey, this is what I've kind of known myself to be. This is who I built myself into. I'm a fisherman, but I'm being called to something else, maybe a little bit differently. But not only are they leaving that, they're leaving their family. Literally, the sons of Zebedee, they get out of the boat. Their dad's in the boat. They get out of the boat, and they're leaving their family right here. But there's also like some that isn't in the text, but they're also losing their future hopes. I don't know about you all. A lot of times what I struggle with more so is less about leaving the actual things that are happening and more what I have in my mind of what I want. God, if I do this, then I may not be able to have this. That may sound silly because it's a hypothetical. It's not a reality, but it's these dreams that I can often build in my head or these aspirations I could have. And sometimes that's the hardest thing to do, is to leave the things that aren't even there yet. And they're leaving that right here. They're following Jesus not only with their feet, but their hearts are also following after. Sometimes you follow Jesus with your feet before your heart, but they are following after him. There was a professor named Dallas Willard, and he was a professor for about 48 years at USC. He taught philosophy at USC, and he had a lot of great books, Divine Conspiracy. And so the Divine Conspiracy, he talks about the word that we use for disciple. It's kind of a weird word. I don't know about you all. I don't usually use disciples outside of like kind of biblical language. Like if you're a fan of I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan, I probably should not have said that for this week, but I said it. I don't say I'm a disciple of the Dallas Cowboys. That just sounds weird, right? The word disciple, he says, should better be translated to apprentice. It's the word mathetos. And he says it's an apprentice. Why? When you think of the word apprentice, you think of like a woodworker, you think of maybe like a blacksmith. What does an apprentice do? They partner alongside with a master. They partner alongside with someone who knows what they are doing, and they're doing life with him or her. They're walking with them. Okay, that's how you cut that. Okay, interesting. Okay, so you do it this way, and they do it back and forth. It is a hands-on learning experience. What the disciples are about to get is an apprenticeship. It is a hands-on learning experience. I think one of the problems with kind of like 21st century like American Christianity is we don't look at discipleship as hands-on. That we're walking with Jesus and we're doing a life alongside Jesus. That our prayer is walking daily alongside him and bring him in on that and doing life with him and learning from him. It's not reading an instruction manual and just doing your own thing. It is doing life with Christ. Inviting men on that and helping you teach. Even when you mess up, bringing it, that's not how you do this. That's why Christian community is so important. Again, it's an apprenticeship more than actual being just a disciple. One thing I think we can also pull from this text is that Jesus wants to interrupt our life and our comfort. Christ's call never follows our schedule. We think we want something a certain way, but then Christ comes in. Oftentimes, it can be an inconvenience for us in our own desires and our own plans. I'll never forget, I felt a call to ministry in 2013, and I didn't fully commit to that call. It was kind of a Jonah story, and up and down, back and forth, where God, I want to do this, no, I want to do that. And it wasn't until 2017 that I finally said, you know what, God, I'm submitting to you, and I'm going to follow this call in my life. Why? Why did I have such a hard time? Because I had aspirations and dreams of what I wanted to accomplish. You know what? It took a while for my heart to kind of conform to it. What I would ask for you all is, what areas, maybe it's not full-time ministry, but what areas in your own personal life is Christ asking you to submit to? Like, what is that? Maybe that looks like sharing the gospel with a coworker or a neighbor. This is a person that you know is not a believer, or a person that maybe if they are a believer, they've kind of backslidden a little bit and they're struggling. Maybe 2023 is you saying, you know what? I'm done putting it off. I'm going to share the gospel. Maybe it's different. Maybe it's you finally saying, you know what? I've been walking as a believer for a while. I want to engage in a mentor-mentee relationship. And you're saying, I've walked, I have some years of experience. I don't think I have a lot to teach, but I got enough. And I just want to do life and walk alongside a younger believer in a way. Maybe this is the year that you're doing that. Maybe it's finally putting off all the excuses and saying, hey, I'm going to finally become part of a Bible reading group or a life group. I want to engage in biblical community. 2022 and beforehand, I made excuses. I didn't get fully plugged in. But you know what? I don't care if it's inconvenient to my schedule. This is important. Biblical community matters, and this is the year that we're going to bring that part of the schedule. What I love right here is that these are fishermen who get called out of their comfort zone. Where are they comfortable? On the water. What are they comfortable doing? Fishing for fish. What's Christ saying? Fish for people. They're more uncomfortable on land than they are on water. He's saying, I want to call you out of your comfort and what you normally do, and I want to call you to a unique and a different way. Fish for people. Jesus wants to take your ordinary life and invite you into an extraordinary story. He wants to take your ordinary, your day-to-day life and say, hey, I want to make you a part of something much larger and much bigger. Let's break down real fast what he says in verse 17. First, he says what? Follow me. It's pretty simple, but it has a profound impact. He doesn't say, go to church. He doesn't say, go on a mission trip once a year. He doesn't say, hey, make sure you're reading the up-to-date Christian book list. He doesn't say, hey, I hope you have a great worship playlist on your Spotify or your Apple Music and that Elevation's playing or what. He doesn't say that. He doesn't even say, hey, have proper doctrine and I'll make you fishers of men. Is all that good stuff? Yes. But what does he say? Follow me. I think we can overcomplicate the Christian walk, and we can think the extra things are the main thing. What is the main thing? Are you just walking with Jesus? And are you seeking after him? More than the other stuff. He just says, follow me. He also says, I will make you fishers of men. Jesus wants to make us. I don't know about you all. If anyone says, I want to make you, off the bat, it makes me kind of uncomfortable, right? There's a little bit of a stressor there. Sometimes it can be hard to be made into something. But Jesus says, I want to make you into fishers of men. We are all being made by something, whether we know it or not. Now, my question for you is, what are you being made by? In this coming year, in 2023, what is making you into the person you're becoming? When you look back a year from now and it's 2024, what are you thinking? Like, what made you into the person you are? Is it culture? Is it just taking in all the social media and the way that life happens in the workplace and how they say how this is how life is done? Is that what's making you into the person you are? What you find funny? What you get passionate about? What you get angry about? Is it the world telling you that? Or is it Christ? Maybe it's your past view of yourself. We've all made mistakes, but maybe something in our past that we've made still haunts us to this day. And we think, can Christ really use me? I've said this, or I've done this, or this is what my relationships look like, and it's just messy. Are you allowing a past idea of who you are to haunt you to this day where you're not allowing Christ to make you into something? Because he has a plan. I would also say, lastly, are you allowing your friendships and the people around you to conform who you are? Again, the people that we invite into our lives who give us criticism, who give us encouragement, who help form us, and are those Christ influences who are making us more into the image of what Jesus wants us to be? Again, what are we becoming and what is making us? Christ says, I will make you fishers of men. I love that these men cast down their nets. And there's a lot that you can do with that. But what I would ask is, what's that one thing that Christ is bringing you into this year that you just got to throw down? That maybe this is what you define yourself by, and it's not bad. Maybe it's your work. We've talked a lot about work today. Maybe it's a relationship. But what are the things that Christ is very much that you hold on to that he's saying, hey, if you want to follow me, this is something you just got to drop. This is something that you got to leave behind. In order to go forward into this year, you got to go backwards on that, and you got to leave it behind. I think this passage has a profound impact. It's one sentence that we read, follow me and I will make you fishers of men, or I will fish for people. But in that passage, it's a hard calling that many of us will wrestle in the next weeks and months and years with. What does that look like? One thing that I love very much is I attend a Thursday night life group. I don't lead, I just attend. I would encourage anyone, if you're a part of, we as a staff, we all very much want to be a part of a life group. But the way that we start off every life group and every week, and it's great, is have you had any gospel conversations this week? It's just kind of a good check, where we kind of think through our week. And sometimes, man, there's powerful stories. And you're thinking like, I remember a few weeks ago, a guy was like, hey, I was in an Uber and I had a really just in-depth conversation of a guy who'd fallen away from the church and he kind of came back to it. And we're like, okay, like that's great. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's like, I brought up Jesus and they did not want to talk. And that was my conversation, if it was called a conversation. But what's great about it is it kind of gives us a little bit of accountability, but it's also just encouraging to hear about what's going on in the lives of everyone in our group. Like what gospel conversations are they? In what way is kind of Christ piercing through maybe some dark industries or dark areas of work or life or neighborhoods or apartment complexes, and Christ being made known in those areas? I love that about us. And what I would ask is when he says fish for people, what he's talking about is, are you letting people know of the good news? And sometimes that's an explicit, hey, Christ lived, he died, he was buried, he's raised again, and there's resurrection. But sometimes it's also, this is what Jesus is doing in my life. Life's not good right now. It can be hard, but I have faith in it. I'm celebrating, but here's the thing, this celebration is not the main thing of my life. Jesus is even bigger than that. In what ways is Christ being made known, and we're letting people know of the good news that we have? It's a new year, people are excited, but as we all know, oftentimes years can go downhill really fast, or it can have seasons of up and down. How can we make Christ known in this year? There's one verse I want to put up on the screen real fast, and it's from the book of Acts, and it's Acts chapter 4. In Acts 4:13, it says, when they observed the boldness of Peter and John and realized that they were uneducated and untrained men, they were amazed and recognized that they had been with Jesus. So this is in the book of Acts. This is after Jesus has died. This is after he's been resurrected. This is after Pentecost, right? People have come to know Christ when the authorities take them in. I love this. What do they remark about these two disciples? Did it say, hey, they were the smartest guys in the room? They knew all the information? They were the most trained. It says right there that they were uneducated and untrained. That was clear, whether that was in the accent that they had or that's in the way they explained things or their history. That was clear that they were uneducated and untrained. But what did they know? They were amazed and they recognized they had been with Jesus. Everyone's making different ideas of what do I want this year to be. We're setting goals. We're setting resolutions. One thing that I would encourage everyone is be with Jesus. Be with Jesus. What do people recognize more than anything on these disciples? It's that they were with Christ. Maybe that looks like, again, for you, that sitting down, I'm digging in the Word this year. I want to talk with Jesus. I want to look next year and say, you know what? I walked with him and I know him better. Again, biblical community. Are we walking in that? What I love about the passage that we read today is that in verse 16, it literally says that Jesus was passed alongside the Sea of Galilee. It says that Jesus passed along the Sea of Galilee and he called out, follow me. Jesus is on the move. He's walking, he's going about, Jesus is doing, but what's he doing? Hey, come follow me. Come join in on what I'm already doing. Jesus is on the move in Nashville and in your neighborhoods. He's moving. He's doing what he's going to do. The question for you today is, do you want to be a part of that? Do you want to fall alongside him and come and be a part of it? And so as Nicole comes back up and as the band does, what I ask you is if you all bow your heads real quickly. I'm going to ask everyone, who is a person in your life that the pool of your life that God has put there? Maybe this is a family member that doesn't know Christ, that over Christmas break, it became very apparent, like, I know I should have had a conversation last year, but every year I kind of push it off. Maybe this is a coworker that you love him or her, they're great friends, but you know they don't know Jesus. And you know that, man, I want to share that good news in their life. Father, as we come to you, we just want to pray that you give us the strength and the courage, as well as the opportunity to let others know about you. You called us not because we are overly special by any means, not because we know anything, or because we're trained, or that we're super spiritual. You called us because we're broken. You called us because we need you. And we just want to thank you for allowing us to partner alongside you. So I just pray again that 2023 can be a year that each of us in this room can say, I had the opportunity to share the gospel. I had the opportunity to follow you in a deeper way. And I pray even more so that we can say, I did that, God. I followed you and I knew you even greater. So as we sing this to you, God, in a second, that we say, I surrender all, I pray whatever net that we need to throw down, that we just throw it down and we surrender it to you this year, and that we can start this year off saying, God, we are following after you. In your name, Jesus, amen.